Hey guys, Leland from Riker's Reptiles here. Today I'm going to be doing a video on a setup of your ball python enclosure. I haven't done one of those videos in a while, but since we just finished the reptile show, I had a lot of questions about this topic. In fact, my voice is really hoarse from talking about all this so much. So I'm going to make a video about it, and then I'm going to post it up. That way you guys can check it out. I did sell quite a few snakes, so now I have some enclosures to clean out and then reset up and then move over some reptiles that I want to keep in the bigger enclosure. So I'm going to bring you along for this video, and you can check it out. And please put stuff in the comments if you have any questions. And also, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And I'll see you later. All right, so this is one of the cages that I'm going to be cleaning out. It's due for a complete clean, and this ball python in here is probably too big for this enclosure. So I'm going to go ahead and move them over to the big house. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the big one looks like. It's probably a 50-gallon enclosure because it's pretty wide. It's about the same length as a 40-gallon, but it's super wide. So I'm going to say it's at least 50 or 60 gallons. So this is where the corn snake was living. He had a great space in here. So I'm going to clean all out that substrate, get it all cleaned out, wash it out really good. And then I'm going to go over what I'm going to put in here and why I'm putting it in there. Just to show you, oftentimes when people buy a snake from a breeder or even a pet shop, because they usually come from breeders, this is the size tub that your hatchling's coming out of. So it's used to having a confined space with its surroundings, touching it so it feels comfortable, and they like a smaller space. So when you go from a space this big to a space, most people are putting them in right into 40-gallon terrariums. As you can see, it's a much larger space for this snake. So it's not going to feel secure inside this big tank unless you give it plenty of spots to feel secure. So we're going to cover that as I put this tank together. Okay, so I had the conversation multiple times with people yesterday about a thermostat. The thermostat regulates your heat pad. Your heat pad plugs into the thermostat plugs into the wall. You set your heat pad to 88 degrees on the hot spot. Now you might have to turn up your thermostat above that to get the internal temperature to be correct right on the hot spot. So we're going to cover that as I install it, but I wanted to show what a thermostat looks like. And a lot of people were confusing thermostat for thermometer. A thermometer is going to tell the temperature inside the terrarium, and usually it's one of those little dials in the back over there. This one's ripped off because he shed and has been monkeying around in here. But basically this is a thermostat, not a thermometer, and you definitely need that or the heat pad will burn your snake's stomach, okay? So the heat pad will go under the tank. I'm going to show you on this other tank, but this other tank has a dial operated heat pad, which I do not recommend because I always have to check this thing. When there's a power out, it shuts off. It has to be turned back on, and then it's got to be reset. So I don't recommend using this type of pad. And it's got just a little dial on its side right here. And I mark on there where it needs to be. But it is not a good pad. I don't recommend using these, okay? So I'd go with a regular Zoom Ed heat pad, maybe at least a 9-inch one, and then also a thermostat. And so the thermostat probe will go on this heat pad underneath the tank. So you got pad, you got probe, then you stick it to the bottom of the tank. So it's looking like this, but there would be a probe on here, okay? And that would regulate it. And so you'd keep this side on the inside of the glass. You want it 88 degrees, okay? So you might have to turn up that thermostat above 88 degrees to get this temperature right here at 88. So we're going to take a test. I've been warming this one up for a little while I was cleaning out the enclosure. You always want to get the temperatures correct before you put in the substrate. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. We got 88s. So once the substrate goes in there, we'll be really close to where we need to be. So this could actually probably go up a couple more degrees. And this is a infrared heat gun. I would definitely recommend buying one of these. You don't have to buy this one. This one's super expensive. But you could just buy a base model one at Home Depot or Ace Hardware or something, and it'll work just fine. But definitely pick up one of these, because then you're going to see what your cool side's at, and your ambient. So if it's 72 in here, that tells me I might need a little heat lamp up here that doesn't give off light, that may give me up to 78 degrees. 78 to 80 degrees is kind of like where their ambient needs to be on this side. So I'm going to definitely need a hot lamp in here, because this room is cold. So the ambient's going to stay the same as the room. Okay, so let's get building. And another note about the ambient temperature. I did have a customer where they ran their rooms really hot at their house. Their snake stopped eating because it couldn't self-regulate and go from a hot spot to a cool spot, because the cool side of the tank was too hot. So that snake went off of food. Once we corrected those issues, bam, went right back onto food. So that's an important thing, to make sure that you have the correct ambient temperature as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you something on this pad. This pad is not an even heat pad. So over here, you're in the 80s. Over here, you get up into the high 80s. I turned it up a little, so it's up to 90 now, but all in this area right here. And these are cooler areas. So what I'm going to do is, I found that out before I put the hide and get everything together. I'm going to use a little bit bigger hide than I normally would with this size snake. That way I could put it over the heat. It could be on the hot if it wants to, or it could still be in the hide on a little bit cooler side if it wants to, but still be in its hide and still be warm, because this will trap the warmth from the pad. And then he's a little bit smaller snake, so I'm going to put in this paper right here into his hide to make the hide smaller, to feel smaller and more secure, and make it feel a little bit more snug. But you can see the pad isn't as big as the hide, so that's going to be nice for this snake to be able to get off of that heat and still be in the hide and still be warm if it doesn't want direct belly heat right there at that time. So that's another trick to moving a snake in that's a little smaller, and you really want the hide to touch the snake. So this snake is about this big. It's about as big as my hand when it's balled up. So there's this much extra space. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that up with something in there, just so that it feels comfortable. And if you're using paper, know that that snake's going to be peeing. It's going to absorb into that paper, and you're going to need to switch out that paper. So don't just leave that paper in for a month. You got to switch it out every once in a while. Like, I'd probably switch it once a week. All right, we're going to go over the substrate. They call that substrate. It's the ground floor of your enclosure. Today I'm going to be using a large cocoa block from Freedom Breeder. And I'm also going to be using an aspen wood bending. So I'm gonna blend this. The cocoa is really good for holding the moisture and knocking down the smell. But this is a huge tank. And I like to clean my tanks pretty often. And so that'd be a pretty expensive bedding to use just the cocoa. So I'm gonna blend it. Make sure you're not using things like cedar. You can use cypress mulch, or you can use aspen wood. I'd recommend those two, and definitely would recommend the cocoa. Okay, the cocoa is great for misting it to keep up the humidity for when it's going to shed. Okay, and then also when it's going to shed, I like to take pantyhose from the 99-cent store, tie off the end, fill it with peat moss, tie off the other end, soak this in water. I do not share these between snakes. They only go to that snake for life, and it'll stay in their terrarium until I make a new one for them. But I fill this with water, and then I drop it in there, and it helps raise the humidity in there when they're shedding. And I only really wet these when they're in shed, and I put it in their enclosure right next to the heat pad to give them more humidity. And then, of course, I'm going to put in a little bit of foliage, like a little plant. I have a live plant too, but a terrarium this big, you want to be able to have the snake go from the hide to the water dish without feeling exposed, and then maybe over to the cool hide without really feeling exposed. And they are ambush predators, so they like to hide behind stuff and then attack. So it's nice to have these little spots for it to feel comfortable. Okay, we're coming along quite nicely. We got the cool hide set up. We got the water set up. We got the plants in. This is the snake's view as it's crawling around in here. What it's gonna see. And we're getting the temps regulated. I had to turn down this temp just a little bit. A good thing to do when you have an enclosure this big and a screen lid, locking screen lid like this, is have a towel or have something to put over it. Or if you have cats in the house, they will jump up on top of this and they'll go right through your enclosure. I've actually had a cat do that, and then my snake escaped. So I put this hard plastic lid over the top on this side that helps trap in the humidity for one, and then it helps keep my cat from falling in there and freeing my snake. So that's something to look out for if you have any other animals in the house. So at this point, I'm just waiting for that to cool down a little on the hot spot before I introduce Robert California to his new enclosure. And another good thing to do is if you have the tank in a high traffic area, like this is a hallway right here, I block off the side of the tank so the snake can't see the commotion in the room, and that helps it feel more secure as well. I also always do something to the back, block that off. This one's next to a wall, so I didn't block it off over here, but that would be good if it was exposed. So you'd only have the front open like this. And even if you had something to block the bottom of the tank like this, would be even better, just so that the snake can't see out, but you can still see in, and that helps them feel more secure. This snake's a good eater. It's going to be probably like 600 grams when I stick it in here. So it's not, I'm not sticking a hatchling into this tank, which I would never stick a hatchling in a tank this small. Or this big. I would probably start them off in a tank that small and then let them move up to this one. Oh, it looks like Robert California is getting a drink. Yep. Getting a little sip right there. Okay, now that I got that tank kind of going, I can rip this one apart and show you how to clean it. So I start with glass cleaner. I get it all cleaned on the outside, the inside, everything wiped down. Then once everything's cleaned out and wiped down, then I wipe it down with a kind of like a moist water, or just moist with water cloth to get the residue of any kind of ammonia or anything out of there. And then the next stage, I'll go to a F10 product, and I'll completely clean the cage with the F10. So it's completely clean and sanitized before I put the new substrate in there. Okay, so now you can see the thermostat taped to the heat pad underneath this tank. So it goes pad, thermostat, taped to the bottom of the tank. Okay, now we'll start building this tank up. Okay, so this is Ursula. She's a scaleless head fire leopard Mojave possible double het pied clown, and she is going to go into this new enclosure. She's a real friendly snake. She does like to, come out and hang out, so I think she'll be really equipped to live in here. So let's go ahead and get her going. I'll get her set in here. Well, girl, what do you think? You like your new house? Check out your hidey hole. Go check it out. She's not really sure what glass is. This is probably her first time to see glass. Or not see it. Alright, so we'll let her get settled in, and then we'll check on Robert California. Alright, so I'm moving them in. They always kind of do a little hot lap. They check out their enclosure when they get in there. So we got this is the cool side. We got the water, we got a little bit of foliage, and then we got the warm side. So I got hides on both sides. And then put the locking lid on top. And then once the locking lid goes on top, I put the little security for the cat on top of that. And this one has a little feeding hatch door, which is kind of nice because it's a bigger enclosure. So now the snake can't get out. And now the cat can't get in. And since this room is a little on the cool side, like 73 degrees, I will put a heat lamp with a really weak bulb, like 15, 20 watt bulb with no light, like one of those black ones that just do heat. And it'll make this side over here about 75 to 78 degrees, which is hot enough on the ambient side. The hide is plenty big enough for the snake to get in there and get warm on one side and the perfect 88 degrees on the other side. So it looks like Robert California is enjoying his enclosure already. If you have any questions, go ahead and hit me up inside my DMs. Emma, do you have any questions about how to set up a ball python enclosure?
No.
No. Okay, perfect. Okay, so signing out. Say goodbye to Emma. Bye, Emma.